A human man gave his own blood to an alien vampire woman who was dying of thirst in the desert. The desert didn't care if you were a god, a ghost, or an interstellar tax collector. It would burn the bones off you just the same. Dominic Hale had been walking across its cracked back for 3 hours, muttering to himself, tripping over rocks that had no business being that sharp, and seriously questioning every life decision that led to this precise sand lodge moment. It had started with a transmission, garbled coordinates bouncing off a half-dead relay beacon, promising salvage from a downed shuttle, the kind of message smugglers ignored and desperate people believed. Dominic, comfortably seated in the latter category, had loaded up his skimmer, kissed his solar panel good luck, and plunged into the Void Rift dunes like a man with nothing to lose but a terrible sense of direction. He found her on the 4th ridge. At first, he thought it was just another scrap of metallic hull, maybe from a wreck. Her skin shimmered like forged silver, hair tangled with sand and sun-bleached vines, and her body lay twisted in a way that looked final. Then the wind shifted, a soft exhale. He froze, bent down. Long ears, longer than any human's, twitched at the base, nearly hidden beneath layers of soot and dust. Not a piece of tech, then. A person, or something very close. She was dying, that much was obvious. Skin cracked like old porcelain, lips parched and flaked. Her eyes opened, just a sliver, and he saw them, violet, glowing faintly like the last flickers of a neon sign. There was hunger there, deep, raw, desperate. A hunger that didn't quite register as human. He should have run. Every inch of common sense screamed it. Instead, he dropped to one knee, fished the knife from his belt, and without hesitation, sliced his palm. She didn't even move, so he leaned closer, stuck his hand out awkwardly like he was introducing himself to a snake. "Hey," he said, "because what else do you say in that situation? Don't die or anything. I've got exactly 0 first aid training, and I'm not emotionally prepared for a space vampire to expire in front of me." Her nostrils flared. A second later, her head lifted slightly with a strength that didn't belong to something that had been melting under twin suns. Her lips touched his hand, slow, almost reverent. And then she drank. He didn't know what he expected. Fangs and shrieking, maybe some thrashing, a dramatic orchestral sting. Instead, it was quiet, too quiet. Her lips were cool, her touch light. She didn't gulp like a predator. She sipped like a sommelier discovering a vintage she hadn't tasted in centuries. The cut stung like hell, but he didn't pull away. Couldn't. When she finally let go, her body slackened again, but her eyes were wide now, brighter, alert. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but not from pain. More like disbelief or guilt, possibly both. Dominic blinked. "Would you believe me if I said I do this sort of thing all the time?" "No." "Yeah, fair." She sat up slowly, bones creaking like old hydraulics. Up close, she didn't look monstrous. She looked alien, sure. Skin that shimmered with unnatural sheen, ears long and fine-tipped like sonic dishes, pupils that adjusted their shape as she scanned the horizon. But she wasn't terrifying. Just strange, wounded, real. He held out a canteen. She sniffed it, then looked at him like he just offered to poison her. "It's water," he explained. "Regular, non-toxic water. Probably. I mean, it came from a vending filter, so there's a chance it tastes like feet." She took it, drank, gagged. "It does taste like feet. I warned you." She stood up then, shakily, but with a posture that screamed of someone who used to command things. Armies, probably, or fleets. Maybe violent book clubs. She stared at the twin suns as if they personally offended her. Dominic scratched at his chin, watching her. "You got a name?" She didn't answer. Just took another cautious sip of the cursed water and said, "Why did you help me?" "Impulse, bad judgment, possibly heat stroke. That wasn't just blood, it was more." Her voice lowered. "Your essence." "Okay," he said slowly. "Now you're making it weird." Her gaze snapped to him, sharp enough to cut steel. "You've bound me." "To what? A debt? I mean, I wasn't really expecting payment, Unless you've got a star cruiser hidden somewhere and a sense of humor. To you, she said. There was a long pause. The wind kicked up a scatter of sand. A lizard-like drone in the distance exploded for no discernible reason. Probably defective wiring. Right, Dominic said, nodding slowly. Okay, sure. Just what every man wants to hear after a first bloodletting. Hey, congratulations! You're now soul married to a desert vampire. She didn't smile, which was a shame because he suspected her teeth were sharp enough to do cool things with. I need shade, she said at last, adjusting the tattered remains of what had once been regal armor. And food, and a map. He gestured vaguely to the distant shimmer of his half-buried skimmer. My ride's got a busted drive coil and exactly one working seat. But hey, it's got an umbrella. So, 5 stars. She blinked at him, then followed. Not behind him, next to him, like an equal, or something more dangerous. What do I call you, by the way? He asked as they trudged across the scorching ground. Because I can't just keep calling you Desert Lady with excellent cheekbones. Sareth. He tried to repeat it, failed. Twice. Say. Is say okay? We humans love abbreviations. It's part of our cultural charm. She didn't answer, which he took as a yes, or a death threat. Hard to tell. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, still blazing, but now slightly less murderously, the skimmer came into view. Dominic exhaled with exaggerated relief. Behold, my chariot of mediocre engineering. Sareth tilted her head. It's ugly. Yeah, well, so are sandworms. Doesn't mean they're not effective. Sometimes. They reached the skimmer. He helped her in, carefully because her limbs were still stiff, and climbed into the pilot seat. As he powered up the drive, which made a very rude noise before reluctantly complying, he caught her staring at him again. What? You smell different now. Oh, great. Is that a vampire thing? Smell commentary. You smell like me. Romantic, he muttered, if a little disturbing. Sareth leaned her head back, closed her eyes. He didn't know what he'd just gotten himself into. But as the skimmer roared across the sands, one thing was crystal clear. This was going to be the weirdest second date in the history of the galaxy. The skimmer coughed, hiccuped, and then gave a sound like an animal dying politely. Dominic slapped the console, not because it helped, but because it was tradition. Somewhere in the mess of duct-taped wiring and humming flux capacitors, a jury-rigged cooling fan squealed back to life and agreed to keep going, begrudgingly. They weren't far from the abandoned wind farm where he'd been squatting for the last 2 weeks. It wasn't exactly home, but it had a roof, filtered water, and a chair that only sometimes bit you when you sat on it wrong. Sareth hadn't spoken for most of the ride. She sat in the passenger seat with her arms crossed, ears occasionally twitching, eyes scanning the horizon like it had personally offended her. She was still barefoot, and her once regal outfit now looked like the losing side of a bar fight. She was recovering fast, though. Too fast. I have questions, Dominic said finally, guiding the skimmer over a dune with the delicacy of a drunk rhino. Sareth didn't look at him. I expect that. Good, because I plan on asking all of them in the dumbest order possible. He held up one finger. 1. Are you going to eat me? She turned her head slowly, those violet eyes narrowing in a way that made his spine whisper unkind things. Not unless I have to. See, that's still not a no. I'm adjusting to your humor. It's inefficient. That's the nicest insult I've gotten all week. The skimmer crested the final ridge. Below, the twisted bones of the wind farm emerged, silver spires and broken turbines leaning like drunk giants. Dominic parked beside the least offensive structure, an old maintenance shack with a reinforced door, a scavenged solar array, and exactly one working light bulb that occasionally flickered like it wanted to be taken seriously. He helped her out, not that she needed it now. Her limbs moved more fluidly, her back straighter, steps steadier. She sniffed the air with a subtle wrinkle of her nose, as if cataloging threats, resources, or maybe just trying to identify the weird smell coming from the nearby water purifier. Inside the shack was a shrine to scavenger minimalism, a hammock, a stack of data pads, an old synth cooker, and a cracked monitor displaying a looping security feed of absolutely nothing. Dominic tossed his gear into the corner, kicked the door shut behind them, and immediately tripped over a stray power cable. Sareth raised one elegant eyebrow. "You live like this by choice?" "No," he groaned from the floor. "I live like this because the galactic economy crashed and someone stole my identity to buy 6,000 units of exotic bird feed." She blinked. "That is strangely specific," he pointed at her accusingly. "You don't get to judge until you've slept next to a screeching sand possum." "I killed one once." He paused mid-rise. "Did it insult your fashion sense or something?" "It insulted my ship." He stopped completely. "Wait, you had a ship?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked around the small room, running her fingers over surfaces, eyes scanning every angle. Not nosy, more like cataloging data, observing a lesser species in its unnatural habitat. "It was destroyed," she said eventually, "by people who thought they understood what I was. They were wrong." He rubbed his forehead. "Okay, that's dramatic and worrying. But I'm just going to assume you're not planning a murder-revenge tour. Only if provoked. Great, I'll just make sure the coffee machine doesn't insult your ancestors." She gave him a look he couldn't interpret, then sat cross-legged on the floor like a meditating panther. Her ears twitched again. "Why the ear?" he asked before he could stop himself. She opened one eye. "Why the hairless face?" He gestured to his jaw. "Excuse me, I have very respectable stubble." "Is that what you call it?" "Okay, now you're just being hurtful." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. More like a moment of weakness that almost looked like one. "Fine," she said. "You want answers. I will give you 3. "Just 3? My energy is still limited, and your species tends to forget answers after 4 consecutive sentences." "Fair enough. Hit me." 1. I'm not from this system. I arrived through an unstable wormhole caused by a collapsing binary pulse. It ejected my ship, what was left of it, into your orbit. That explains the crash. 2. I am part of a genetic cast engineered for survival, combat, and endurance. Our biology is bound to blood, specifically, offered blood. Dominic nodded. "So you're a vampire." "I am not undead." "Still drank my blood, though." She ignored that. 3. The bond you created by offering blood willingly is ancient. Older than your recorded history, it connects us now. Define connect. She met his gaze. "If you die, I die." Silence. "Okay," Dominic said after a long pause. "Well, that's going to make casual recklessness a bit more stressful." "There is more," she added. "I can sense your emotions. Not clearly, just impressions." Dominic put a hand over his heart. "Can you sense that I'm currently a swirling cocktail of panic and ill-timed attraction?" She didn't blink. "Yes." He groaned and collapsed into the hammock. "Gods, this is the weirdest Thursday I've ever had." Sareth stood and paced to the window. Outside, the stars were beginning to bloom in the purple sky, twin suns dipping low. "There are others," she said quietly, "of my kind. They will sense me now, because of the bond. They may come." "Friends? Unlikely." "Well, that's ominous." She tilted her head, listening to something far away. "We have time. They will not move fast. They will not expect me to be tethered." "Tethered," he echoed. "Sounds romantic." "It's not. I was hoping for at least one vampire honeymoon." She looked back at him, completely deadpan. "Do you always talk this much when you're anxious?" "Only when I'm not unconscious." She turned away again, silent for a moment. "You have courage," she said at last, "but also the instincts of a defective droid." "I get that a lot." He let his eyes drift shut for a moment. He hadn't meant to fall asleep, but the day had been long, hot, and full of blood-related bonding ceremonies. His dreams were filled with silver skin and echoing voices, vast starships humming like insects in the void. He woke once in the night to find her sitting by the door, watching the sky. Her ears flicked. "Go back to sleep." "Still guarding me?" "Guarding us." Dominic turned over. "I liked it better when I was just broke and sunburned." "Too late now," she murmured. And the stars outside burned just a little brighter. Morning didn't arrive in the usual sense. It crashed in, blinding light through the warped plastic window, the screech of a sand beetle crawler passing too close to the shack, and Dominic waking up tangled in his hammock like a sentient pretzel. His back protested immediately, so did his neck, and one eye for reasons he couldn't identify. He groaned and tried to sit up with the grace of a man who'd slept under a curse. Sareth was still seated by the door. She hadn't moved all night, or if she had, she'd done it without leaving a single crease in her posture. Her eyes were open, glowing faintly, as if she was plugged into a less-than-legal satellite feed of the universe. "Morning," Dominic croaked. "Unless vampires don't believe in those." She didn't look at him. "There is no such thing as a vampire. That term is your mythology attempting to rationalize a trait of evolutionary adaptation." "Great. I'll be sure to put that on a mug someday. I'm not a vampire, just an evolutionary misfire with charm." Now she looked at him. "You have sleep crust in your eye." "Fantastic. Next time maybe lead with something gentle like good sunrise or your face isn't a complete disaster today." He rolled out of the hammock, pulled on his boots, which somehow managed to feel full of sand, even though they'd been sealed, and started the coffee rig. It wheezed at him like it was about to unionize. He gave it a sharp smack and whispered motivational threats, and eventually, it coughed out something dark and vaguely drinkable. She watched every movement with unsettling precision. Not the way people watched. More like how predators studied prey they weren't hungry for yet. "You don't trust me," she said. "I trust you not to kill me before I've had caffeine. That's something." "I meant long-term." "Oh, definitely not," Sareth nodded, as if that was fair, which, to be honest, it probably was. They ate. Dominic had a few protein pucks left and offered one to her, which she sniffed, bit, then spat out like it had offended her ancestors. He couldn't blame her. The taste was somewhere between dry algae and regret. He tapped at his cracked console and brought up the nav grid. It took longer than usual to load, flickering through low-res maps and glitching data, but eventually it displayed a rough layout of the region. His shack was marked with a blinking red dot labeled, "You are probably here." "We need a ship," he said. "Something off-grid, fast, and not likely to explode if someone sneezes too hard." Sareth leaned over the map, ears twitching. "How many enemies do you have?" He pretended to count on his fingers. "You mean in this system, or in general?" "In this system. Rough estimate, 5, maybe 6. Depends if Melba's still mad about the broken drone arm." "Who is Melba?" "A trader with anger management issues and a collection of handmade knives. Long story, short version. Don't touch her fruit preserves without asking." Sareth gave him a look that suggested she'd already judged his entire species based solely on that information. "I will need weapons and armor. I've got a plasma wrench, a half-charged stun baton, and a railgun that only works if you sing to it first." She blinked. "Don't ask. It's a sensitive piece of machinery." They packed quickly. Dominic stashed the essentials: 2 flasks of semi-clean water, 3 protein bars that probably wouldn't kill them, a solar charger, and the baton. Sareth didn't need much. She retrieved a thin dagger from a seam in her clothing that hadn't existed yesterday and tucked it into her boot like it belonged there. She moved like someone who'd worn blades her whole life. They took the skimmer. It sputtered, complained, and eventually agreed to move. The closest settlement with a functioning market was Dustwake, a crater town built inside the remains of an old mining crawler. Not a welcoming place, but useful if you had credits and low expectations of hygiene. The trip was mostly silent, save for the occasional hiss of the engine or the wind pelting them with sand. Dominic tried to keep his nerves in check, but his brain refused to shut up. "So," he said after an hour of resisting the urge, "do you guys sparkle in moonlight, or is that just an urban legend?" Sareth didn't even look at him. "If I had less control, I would end you." "That's fair." Dustwake appeared on the horizon like a bruise in the desert, jagged towers rising from the old crawler's spine. Drones buzzed overhead. A wall of salvaged scrap encircled the main entrance, manned by guards in patchwork armor and bad attitudes. They were stopped immediately. One of the guards, a woman with cybernetic eyes and a shotgun that looked fused to her arm, squinted at Sareth. "She legal?" Dominic smiled his most winning, least trustworthy grin. "She's my emotional support alien," The guard didn't blink. Paperwork? Dominic reached into his jacket, pulled out a crumpled data chit, and handed it over. The guard scanned it, blinked, then handed it back with a grunt. Good for 24 hours, don't cause trouble. No promises, he said brightly. Inside, Dustwake was alive in the most aggressively unhygienic way possible. Stalls buzzed with traders hawking parts, food, and items of wildly questionable origin. Someone was selling pet slugs that glowed when they were angry. A small child offered to polish Dominic's boots with what turned out to be motor oil. Sareth moved beside him like a shadow, drawing looks. Some curious, some cautious, one or two greedy. They reached the ship trader at the edge of the market. A squat man with a face like melted rubber and goggles so thick they could stop a laser cannon. You're looking for a ride, the trader said, not bothering with pleasantries. Dominic nodded. Something fast, quiet, and preferably not held together by hope and chewing gum. I have a freighter, the man said. Old, ugly, but solid. Needs a new hypercore. I'll throw in a refurbished one for a price. What's the catch? It used to belong to a pirate queen. Might still have her curses on it. Dominic glanced at Sareth. How do you feel about cursed ships? I am cursed, she said. Perfect. We'll feel right at home. They struck a deal. Credits were exchanged. Paperwork signed with a stylus that shocked Dominic twice. The ship was docked just outside the settlement, partially buried in the sand. It looked awful, but it hummed, not in a way machines did, but in a way that felt alive. Sareth placed a hand on the hull. Her ears twitched. This vessel has teeth, she said. Dominic stared. Cool. I've always wanted to pilot something with an oral fixation. Don't talk. Copy that. They stepped inside. The ship was dark, warm, full of half-working systems and dim lights that flickered like nervous fireflies. But it had power. It had history. And most importantly, it had potential. Dominic turned toward her. So, where do we go? Sareth tilted her head. Where they won't expect us. Let me guess, somewhere dangerous, probably illegal, and crawling with things that want us dead? Yes. I'm starting to think you're a bad influence. You saved me, she said, voice low. Now I will save you. Dominic looked around at the cursed pirate ship they'd just bought from a man who smelled like engine grease and lies. Yeah, he muttered. This is definitely going to end well. The ship didn't so much take off as shake itself violently awake and lurch into the sky like a hungover bat. Dominic gritted his teeth and clung to the console as Sareth calmly adjusted the trajectory, her long fingers moving with a grace that said she'd flown vessels far more complex than this one, possibly blindfolded and during planetary re-entry. The interior lights flickered in protest. Something sparked behind them, and the onboard AI, whose name, according to the startup diagnostics, was Chaz, sputtered to life with all the enthusiasm of a depressed toaster. Welcome aboard, Chaz intoned in a voice that could only be described as passive-aggressive British. You've activated emergency flight mode. Please note, you are operating with 6 out of 17 primary systems in failure. Please also note, you are terrible at this. Dominic scowled. Great, a ship with opinions. Sareth didn't react. She was watching the stars slide into place through the cracked view panel, her expression unreadable. She hadn't said much since Dustwake, only offered coordinates, an uncharted sector nestled between a collapsed asteroid belt and a nebula with a reputation for eating exploratory probes like candy. Dominic checked the nav again. So, this place we're heading, the void between, that's not just a poetic nickname, is it? No, she said without looking at him. It is what your people would call a dead zone, a place where signals vanish, where ships go, but rarely come back. Right, so naturally we're going there. There's something hidden in the dark, something they took from my people before the wars. I was really hoping you were going to say a treasure chest full of apology notes and cookies, but okay. The ship groaned as it broke through the atmosphere, the gravity curl slinging them into deep space with all the subtlety of a bar fight. Dominic leaned back and tried to breathe. Space, for all its silence, had a way of making his thoughts louder, especially now, especially with her. Hey, he said after a long pause, What happens if this bond thing gets unstable? She glanced at him, slow and deliberate. Why? Because last night I dreamed I was floating in a field of shattered moons, surrounded by screaming stars, and then a giant lizard told me I owed it 30 credits. That is a memory. He blinked. A memory. Yours. She nodded once. Some bleed over is inevitable. The link was formed in desperation, not ritual. Your mind will catch fragments, dreams, emotions, perhaps instincts. Well, that explains why I woke up trying to bite my own wrist. She raised an eyebrow. It was a curious nibble, not an aggressive one. Sareth returned to the nav screen. If we reach the coordinates in time, I can sever the bond. Dominic felt a tug of something then, uncertainty maybe, or disappointment. He wasn't sure whose. Right, of course. That's good. Probably for the best. No offense, but you don't strike me as the forever roommate type. None taken, Chaz interrupted with a staticky cough. Apologies for the intrusion, but sensors have detected an anomaly. Large energy spike, origin unknown. And, how should I put this? Something is following us. Dominic sat up. Following us? Through a dead zone? Yes. Either they're very determined or very stupid. Possibly both. Sareth narrowed her eyes. Can you show the trajectory? A small hologram bloomed between them. A dark dot trailed their course like a smudge on a chalkboard. That's a pursuit curve, she said. Dominic squinted. You mean like someone chasing us? Number, it's too clean. They're anticipating our turns, not reacting, predicting. So, they know where we're going. Or they know me. Dominic exhaled. Fantastic. Anyone you forgot to send a "sorry I bit you" card to? Her silence was answer enough. He stood and moved toward the rear systems panel. We've got some shielding, right? Even if it's mostly decorative? Chaz sniffed. We have patchwork deflectors and one functioning countermeasure pod. I would not advise a confrontation unless you are fond of explosions. Explosions are fine, Dominic muttered, as long as they're not our explosions. The ship bucked suddenly, not from impact, but from something deeper, like the space around them had just shifted. Sareth tensed. We're close. To the anomaly? To the threshold. Beyond it lies the vault. Dominic blinked. Vault? No one said anything about a vault. Vaults are never just vaults. They're always buried in shadow and protected by, I don't know, memory-eating spiders or time loops. You exaggerate. I've been on 3 archaeological jobs. One had a box that made you relive your worst breakup. For 7 hours. Chaz cut in. Attention, the pursuing vessel has match speed. It's hailing us. Dominic exchanged a glance with Sareth. You want to do the honors? No, she said, settling into the co-pilot seat. I want to see if they lie. He tapped the comms. The screen flickered. A face appeared. Lean, angular, with a mouth made for smirking and an eye implant that glowed faint blue. Well, the man said smoothly, look who crawled out of the desert and found herself a driver. Sareth, you look hydrated. Her voice went cold. Thalon. Dominic muttered, great. Of course your evil ex would track us through space. He is not my ex. That makes it worse. Thalon leaned back in his seat. Behind him, shadows moved. Crew, or maybe things that had once been crew. Hand over the artifact, or the blood bag dies. Dominic blinked. Wait, am I the blood bag in this metaphor? Literal, Sarah said under her breath. Oh good, Thalon smiled. He doesn't know, does he, that what you took from me, from the vault, isn't just a relic. It's a weapon, a signal. You open that door and you wake up every sleeper cell across the system. Sareth's hand hovered near the ignition. Let him go, Thalon said. You don't owe him. You know what's coming. Sareth looked at Dominic, and something in her face flickered. Then she cut the feed. Dominic stared. Okay, quick question. How many galactic revolutions are we about to trigger? All of them, she said. He sighed. Awesome. Let's make history. The ship rattled like a dying drum solo as they dove into the mouth of the nebula. clouds of ion-charged dust flickering blue and red across the hull. The stars vanished one by one behind the fog, swallowed like sugar in hot water. Ahead of them, nothing. Just black. Thick, wrong-feeling black that bent light and maybe a few laws of physics. Dominic gripped the edge of the console and made a noise halfway between a grunt and a whimper. So just to be super clear, this vault we're flying toward, it's not cursed, right? Sareth was at the helm, posture infuriatingly calm, like she was navigating a luxury cruise and not a swirling death cloud. It is not cursed. Oh, good. It is haunted, he groaned. Why is that worse? The difference is in the intent. Curses are reactionary. Hauntings are residual. I'm going to residual all over this chair in a second. Behind them, Chaz buzzed irritably. Telemetry degraded. Sensors are blind. Hull integrity holding at 78%. Please note, your decision-making remains deeply questionable. Dominic turned and pointed at the ceiling. You know, if I wanted constant criticism, I'd have stayed in touch with my ex. I have analyzed your past messages, Chaz replied. You ghosted her after the third moon hike. That was a tactical retreat, and I stand by it. The ship jolted sideways as something massive drifted past. Just a shadow, no shape, no sound. Only that strange sense of being watched by something without eyes. Sareth didn't flinch. Her gaze was fixed on the coordinates she'd locked in, with the kind of grim determination usually reserved for last stands and family dinners with in-laws. Dominic took a breath. Okay, let's get tactical. What exactly is in this vault? Please don't say ancient alien AI, or mind control bugs, or a map that leads to more vaults. She hesitated. That was not comforting. It's not a map, she said slowly. It's a key. To what? To the inheritance. What remains of the first bloodline. He blinked. That sounds like something you should have mentioned before I started making coffee and pretending we weren't hurtling toward doom. You would not have come. That's incredibly fair. The console pinged, a ripple in the static, a flicker of structure ahead. There, she said. Dominic squinted. At first he saw nothing, just more of the thick dark. Then it blinked at him. A starless patch, unnaturally geometric, angular, floating in void space like a shard of erased reality. Is that it? He whispered. Yes, the vault. It looks like someone carved a door into the dark and then decided against putting in lighting. Sareth guided them forward. The ship groaned, but obeyed. Chaz muttered something that sounded like, I regret all of my programming, and then fell silent. The vault loomed closer. It was shaped like a dodecahedron, or maybe a broken one. The edges shimmered, not in color, but in absence, like it was sucking thought as well as light. The entrance was a narrow slit, barely wide enough for the ship. Sareth didn't slow down. I feel like we're about to be born again, Dominic muttered. If so, she said, may the afterbirth be kind. Why would you say that? They passed through. 1 second they were in space. The next, silence. Complete. No hum, no breath, not even the pulse of the ship beneath their feet. Dominic tried to speak and realized sound didn't work here. He looked at Sareth. She was already moving, fluid as smoke, heading toward the airlock. He pointed furiously at his ears and mouthed, Is this normal? She gave him a nod that might have meant yes, or don't panic, or prepare your soul for harvesting. The airlock hissed open, which was impressive considering nothing else made sound. They stepped out into something that wasn't quite a corridor. The material around them resembled obsidian, but it moved faintly under the light. No visible seams, no architecture, just endless hallway. Then sound came back all at once, like someone had lifted a cosmic mute button. Dominic staggered. Okay, nope, that was horrifying. New worst experience. Sareth didn't react. She moved forward toward a pulsing symbol at the far end of the space, a 12-pointed star within a circle. As they approached, the air grew denser, like it had opinions. She stopped. It requires blood. Of course it does. Everything with you does. She held out her hand. He sighed. Just once, I want to unlock a door with a key. A metal key. Maybe a button. He pricked his finger against her dagger. She did the same. Together they touched the center of the sigil. It flared. The wall shimmered, rippled, and then peeled open like the world's worst fruit. Inside, the chamber was spherical. Floating in the center, a crystalline lattice the size of a small car, humming with impossible light. Data flowed through it, not in wires but in strands of memory, images flickering like film through a projector. 1,000 faces, battles, worlds collapsing. Dominic stared. Is that it? The key? Yes. To what again? She stepped forward. To who we were, to what they tried to erase. Something growled from behind them. Dominic turned slowly. The corridor was no longer empty. Thalan stood there, flanked by two creatures that looked like they'd been stitched together from regrets and old bones. He clapped. You always were predictable, Sareth. Still faster than you, she said. He smiled. But not smarter. Dominic whispered. Is now a good time to use the stun baton? Or should I save it for when things get worse? Sareth didn't answer. She was already moving. One heartbeat she was standing, the next she was a blur. Striking, spinning, disarming. The lights in the chamber pulsed with her fury. The bond between them sang. He could feel it in his bones. Her fury, her history, her pain. Dominic did what any reasonable man would do. He flung the stun baton at Thalan's head. It bounced harmlessly off a shield dome. Thalan smirked. Really? I panicked. Then the vault shuddered. The lattice lit up. The walls pulsed. Chaz's voice somehow crackled through Dominic's wristband. Update. Something in that chamber just started broadcasting. To everything. You've flipped the on switch for a system-wide beacon. Congratulations. You've been noticed. Sareth looked back at Dominic. Her eyes were silver fire. You said you wanted to make history, she said. He swallowed. Yeah, but I didn't want to summon it. The chamber throbbed with light and memory. The lattice spun faster, a blur of shifting geometry and old voices whispering names Dominic couldn't understand, but felt in his teeth. Thalan staggered back as a pulse of energy lashed out, shorting the shield dome and tossing one of his undead stitch beasts into the far wall with a wet crunch. The other one didn't seem to notice, or care. It just turned its empty face toward the key and started to screech. No sound, just a vibration that made Dominic's molars feel like they were trying to crawl out of his mouth. Sareth moved, blur fast again, intercepting the beast mid-lunge. Her blade didn't cut so much as a raise, slicing through with a hiss of void light. The creature folded in half and vanished into ash that didn't quite fall, but hovered midair like disappointed ghosts. Thalan snarled, and Dominic, already halfway behind a floating data console, poked his head out just far enough to shout, "This feels like a good moment for diplomacy." Thalan raised a gun that looked more like an angry piece of architecture. "I agree. I propose you die." Sareth kicked the weapon from his hand before the trigger could even warm. She moved like a storm reading its own weather pattern. Fast, precise, inevitable. Dominic ducked as another surge from the lattice cracked the air. "Hey, not to interrupt your extremely impressive murder ballet, but what's the endgame here? We wake the key, it broadcasts to... What exactly?" Sareth didn't answer. Not because she couldn't, but because she was listening. The lattice was humming louder now, and her gaze had turned inward, as if something had just started speaking directly to her bones. Dominic watched her face tighten. Not fear, not pain, recognition. He edged closer, his voice cautious. "Is this where you tell me it's alive?" She nodded. "It remembers?" "Remembers what?" "Everything. The wars, the extinction orders, the betrayals. My people had no archive, no sanctuary, but they poured all memory into this device. A last record, a warning, and a weapon. That last part really snuck in there. They hid it here because no one would come looking." Thalan groaned from the floor. His cheek was bleeding, but his eyes burned with familiar zeal, the kind Dominic had seen in revolutionaries, cult leaders, and once, tragically, a sandwich artisan who believed pickles were evil. "You think you can use it?" Thalan spat. "That your diluted bloodline gives you the right?" Sareth looked down at him. "Number, I know what it cost. I was there when the vault was sealed. Dominic blinked. Sorry, wait, what? I was part of the last wave. My body was preserved, buried until I was needed. You mean this whole time you've been like cryo-frozen, like an ancient popsicle? She nodded. I was meant to awaken when the stars aligned. Or if a carrier survived. Dominic whistled. You're older than my entire civilization. That explains a lot. The lattice pulsed again, and a beam of light struck Sarith in the chest. She didn't flinch. Her body shimmered, and for a moment, Dominic saw layers, a version of her wrapped in ancient armor, another in ceremonial robes, and beneath it all, the same haunted eyes. When the light faded, she swayed slightly, then caught herself. It has accepted the bond. I can guide it now, but I am not its only key. She turned toward Dominic. He froze. Me? Nope. I'm just the blood snack who found you in the desert. I'm comic relief, supporting cast. You gave willingly. You fed the bond. The system has recognized you as anchor. Oh good, I always wanted to be an anchor, dragging everyone down into the abyss. A low groan echoed through the chamber. The vault itself began to shift. Walls folding outward, revealing more chambers, more machines humming with sleep light. Chaz's voice crackled through again. Update, you've tripped a cascade unlock, and I'm registering multiple pings across the system. Whatever you turned on, they noticed. Dominic sighed. Define they. Former empires, derelict fleets, possibly one or two rogue areas. Definitely not the neighborhood welcome committee. Sarith touched the lattice again. We must go. The key will follow. Dominic looked back at Thalon, who was struggling to his feet, leaning on the wall like a villain auditioning for his own backstory. What about him? He will not follow. Thalon coughed. I'm not beaten. No, Sarith said, but you are irrelevant. They turned and ran. Behind them, the vault continued to bloom open, like a mechanical flower infected with forgotten memories. Chaz prepped the ship for launch, complaining the entire time. Oh no, don't mind me. I'm just reactivating ancient propulsion systems mid-haunting. This is totally safe and doesn't violate 14,000 maintenance codes. They launched. As the ship pulled away, the vault shrank in the distance. But pulses of its signal were already spreading. Dominic could see them on the nav screen, shock waves of encoded light, moving faster than thought, touching satellites, abandoned outposts, and long-dead listening stations. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. Okay, that went well. For a given value of well that includes possibly jump-starting a forgotten war and getting haunted by tech ghosts. Sarith didn't smile, but her expression softened. You did more than survive, she said. You became part of a legacy. Great. Does that come with dental? He reached for a ration bar, paused. Sarith? Yes? When this thing finishes waking up, what does it do? She looked at him for a long moment. It calls the others. Dominic blinked. Others like you? No, she said quietly. Others like me before. When the thirst ruled, when the stars bled. He froze. So? Vampire death fleets. She nodded. Bound to the blood, to the call, to me. He slowly unwrapped the ration bar. Cool. That's totally fine. No pressure. I'm sure this will all turn out just spiffy. Then he bit into the bar, grimaced, and muttered, Tastes like regret, Chaz agreed. That's because it is. The twin suns were rising again, casting long amber shadows across the shifting dunes of the desert where it all began. The sand still looked like powdered rust, but it no longer shimmered with the faint taste of death and desperation. Sarah stood barefoot on a dune's crest, her long ears catching the breeze as if listening for ghosts. Her silver skin had softened, her fangs hidden, and for once she didn't look like a blade waiting to be unsheathed. She looked still, present, whole. Dominic stood beside her, squinting at the horizon and sipping from a dented canteen like it was the last cup of coffee in the universe. You ever think about how weird this has all been? He asked. She gave him a sidelong glance. You rescued an ancient vampire war queen from a planetary oven, bonded your blood to hers, woke up a doomsday archive, and accidentally became a beacon to interstellar death fleets. So number, this is all extremely standard. He smirked. Yeah, Tuesday stuff. The sand below them rippled, but not from wind. It was subtle now, the gentle hum of the key in orbit above them. Its signal dampened, its call narrowed. After the vault unlocked fully, Sareth had used her command, her birthright or curse, depending who you asked, to intercept the blood call. She'd bound the signal to a new path, one that didn't scream across the stars but whispered only to the remnants, calling them not for war, but to rest, to return, to sleep. Dominic never thought silence could be loud until the day he realized the stars weren't listening anymore. I still can't believe Chaz uploaded himself into the Keys interface just to get a better seat, Dominic said. He's basically a floating sarcasm virus now. I believe his words were, "It's either this or live in your terrible ship forever." He said that in front of my ship. Your ship was not offended. She turned off life support for 12 seconds. That was her being offended. They both laughed, and it felt strange, easy, natural. Not like borrowed joy, but something they'd earned. They'd fought Thalon and won. If you could call making your enemy implode under the weight of ancient memory a win. His beasts, unanchored from his will, had disintegrated, their tethers gone. The last thing he said, Dominic would never forget. You freed them. You think that makes you a savior. But they weren't chained to me. They were me. Dominic had no clever comeback for that, just a very large stun baton and a sudden urge to test its maximum voltage. Sarah stepped down the dune, walking slowly, toes sinking in the soft sand. Dominic followed, less gracefully. He was better now, fitter, faster, not just because of the bond, but because being nearly eaten by legacy tech monsters had a way of motivating you to run more. At the foot of the dune, their camp was a scrappy little oasis, a patch of shade, a buzz-humming solar tarp, and what Chaz had deemed the most tragically human cooking array in the galaxy. Dominic had tried to make pancakes on it. The result still haunted the tarp. "Are you going to leave?" he asked. Sareth paused, then knelt and drew a symbol in the sand with one finger, a curling line with 12 arcs. "I don't know," she said. "My people are gone. The fleets are fading. The blood has cooled. But you're still here. I was never meant to be." He dropped beside her. "You ever think that maybe fate's a bit crap at planning?" She smiled, the corner of her mouth tilting with a rare lightness. "Often. So maybe it's okay to write your own ending." She looked at him. For once, no armor in her eyes, just the quiet weight of 1,000 years and the strange gift of now. "I never thanked you," she said. He raised a brow. "For the blood thing? Or the terrible jokes?" "For both. You're welcome. Though in fairness, I also technically kidnapped you from your nap and unleashed an ancient war archive. You gave me a future. That outweighs the other details." The wind kicked up again, and from the camp's comm panel came Chaz's voice, faint and chipper. "Alert! There's a sandstorm approaching. You may want to move your fragile meat bodies inside before nature exfoliates you to death." Dominic stood and offered Sareth a hand. She took it without hesitation, her grip warm. "Come on," he said. "Let's go hide from the weather and argue over instant noodles." "I do not understand noodles." "You will. It's the universal language of broke people everywhere." They walked back to the camp, the storm behind them swirling like a gentle curtain. Above, the stars were dim but watchful. Somewhere up there, the key drifted in silence, its beacon damped, its memory still. A new failsafe, still powerful, still ancient, but no longer shouting across the cosmos. Dominic paused at the camp's edge and looked back one last time. "So what happens now?" Sarah stepped beside him. "Now we live." He nodded. "And if the fleets wake up again? Then we remind them what choice looks like." He grinned. "Good answer." They ducked into the tent just as the sandstorm hit, and inside everything smelled faintly of ozone and burned rations. Dominic flicked on the lantern, handed her a bowl, and sat cross-legged on the floor. "You ever think you were meant to be more?" he asked halfway through, slurping something that might have been protein. Sarah tilted her head. "I was made to be more, but I prefer this." He blinked. "You mean us?" "I mean being enough." The wind howled outside. The stars didn't answer. They didn't need to. The end.